So beginning February 14th, our focus will be the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. For these next 2 weeks, the focus is going to be on the teachings of Zenju Earthlyn Manuel. Suzuki Roshi, a student once asked Suzuki Roshi what he thought American Zen would be like in the future. He said, very colorful. I think someplace along the way, Zen became kind of buttoned down. I think that always happens. Something new happens, and then it kind of starts to get institutionalized. Suzuki Roshi came from Japan, I think, because it was institutionalized, and he wanted to come here where it was fresh. And he definitely shook up all of our lives, made it very colorful. Thich Nhat Hanh came from the war. What an amazing thing that he came to this country and brought the teachings and shook up our lives in the best possible way. And I think part of what is happening in this time is that teachers of color are coming forward and sharing their language, their experience with all of us, both in the national and political realm, but in the spiritual realm. And I am so grateful to continue to be shook up in the best possible way. I was in a retreat with Zenju this past weekend, so I want to bring forward some of what she shared there. And she also has a new book coming out, which I don't know if I'll get I don't know if it will arrive in time to be able to share any substantial part of it during these 2 weeks. If it arrives, I will be so happy to be reading it and bringing some of it forward. The retreat itself was about spiritual writing, which she does as beautifully as anyone I know. And she also feels to me like one of the teachers of color that most beautifully lives on the edge of, well, she names it boundlessness and embodiment. That place where this very life that we're given, the particulars, in her case, an African American woman who was born in the South, came from poverty, that it deeply informs her teachings. And she received transmission from Blanche Hartman from San Francisco Zen Center. I knew and practiced with Blanche. And Zenju has a very, I just love feeling when I'm in her presence, I feel like, oh, this is a true Zen person in the best possible way. So I'll share some of what I'm digesting and continue to digest. I want to start today, like I said, with some of the things from this weekend, but also her first book. Well, it's not her first book, actually. It's the first time I knew of her, called The Way of Tenderness. Awakening through race, sexuality, and gender. Awakening through race, sexuality, and gender. She goes right through embodiment and shares it in the most vulnerable and beautiful way with us. Where I want to start, though, and I've read this different times since George Floyd died, and I suspect I will continue to because I think it's such a beautiful, clear. She I don't know if she meant to confess or if it was a confession, but this weekend she talked about how what I'm about to read, darkness is asking to be loved, came out of her rage. She said, when George Floyd happened and everything erupted, there's so much in the Buddhist world is let's be calm, let's not look upset, let's uh, kind of be above all the mess of it. And so she wrote this out of the rage that was arising in her body and on the streets and through the lineage of what she knows and carries. She said, because everyone was trying to be so upright and so good, what she started with was she just told everybody to fall off their cushions. So here it is. By now, we have lost the tiny sense of peace we have created for ourselves. Our composure is an idea long gone, reflected in the grinding of our teeth and locked jaws. If you are still holding up trying to meditate, I invite you to fall down. Fall down on the earth. Come down here and smell the sweat of terror on your skin, overpowering the scent of auger wood. Come down on all fours and greet the darkness that reeks of death, reaches out its desperate hand and asks to be loved as much as we love the light it gives. Come down here on this earth and breathe for those gasping for air. Hear each scream as a bell that never stops ringing. Bury your face in the mud of this intimate place, in this shared disease and tragedy. If you have nothing to say, now is the time for the deeper silence honed that does not apologize or seeks something kind to say. And yet the deeper silence is not quiet. It whispers in the dark and wakes you from the nightmare. Come down here and be still on the earth. Let loose shame, rage, guilt, grief, pain, and make a river of it. Come down here. Catch the love poems hidden in the shouting. Watch the unfolding of the seasons from the ground. Look up at the sky. And when it hurts from being down here so long, roll over and see what you couldn't see from the other side. Breathe out loud. No particular posture is needed. Fall down onto the earth. Fall off your soft cushions. Come down here. Come down here where the only lullaby tonight will be the sound of your heart drumming the songs you were born with. So may we, whether there is distress on the streets, distress in the headlines. Zenju loves Zazen. I know she does. She sits like a true person of Zen. And she also says, come down here. Fall off your cushion and roll on the earth and be willing to feel and look and see and feel again. I don't know that Suzuki Roshi would have ever imagined this when he said Zen would be colorful, but I think we need to keep looking and seeing and feeling and allowing every color and nuance and sound and smell and taste and touch into our hearts and our bodies in this tradition so that we can become true human beings. So here are some things that she shared this weekend. This is from her new book. Not out yet, but she shared some of it. The soft breath of the ancestors touched my face with the sun this morning. I awakened in the sweetness left on my skin last night. The scent of pine and cedar from wood burned in the fire. And the pain is not the problem. The pain is not the problem. It is evidence of life that is older than redwood trees. Can we sit in the ground, feel the silence and the depths, the wisdom that is older than redwood trees, and know it as the sun on our face? She says, the teachings, wisdom, deep seeing comes from the earth, comes from witnessing and seeing and hearing things just as they are. Don't turn away. So one of the reasons I am most drawn to Zenju, well, one of the reasons, is because she speaks of tenderness. It's to me such a koan. How can you not turn away from the suffering and the pain of the world and the anguish and the rage and the anger and the social injustice and the economic disparity, and let it tenderize you? And in that tenderness, find our true voice and the true path of a bodhisattva. I don't think she knows either, but I'm going to keep reading her, and she'll keep listening, and we'll all keep listening, and we'll all keep helping each other, because I don't think there's any other way. She says, the words spiritual awakening conjure images of an experience beyond ordinary life. We may think of spiritual awakening as an experience that transcends this world or that erases all suffering. We may even wish to have an out-of-body or an other extreme experience that we might point to as an awakening. Come on, admit it. Some of us still wish for that. That we'll just get out of here somehow. The wish to spiritually awaken is one of the great natural human desires, ranking right up there alongside the wish to experience love. Yet most of us don't truly know what spiritual awakening is. So here she speaks about from embodiment. She just pointed perhaps to the boundless, now embodiment. I had come to not trust my own innate wisdom. By internalizing the judgments of those who felt that certain types of folks are lesser, I had betrayed myself. I had yielded to oppression. Oppression is a distortion of our true nature. It disconnects us from the earth and from each other. Awakening from the distortion of oppression begins with tenderness. We recognize our own wounded tenderness, which develops into the tenderness of vulnerability and culminates in the tenderness that comes with heartfelt and authentic liberation. The first experience of tenderness is a cry from deep within our own nature. It compels us to seek our reconnection to the earth and each other. And fall off your cushion, come down here and roll around on the earth. As soon as we are born, we begin to drift away from our true nature and we align with established structures that immediately begin to fix our perceptions of others and ourselves, and our lives are shaped by this alignment. Falling into line is a survival mechanism driven by the suffering that already surrounds us at birth. So now we should say, and I think Zenju would say, this is her particular experience as an African American woman, but I think everyone here knows something of which she speaks, of losing our own innate wisdom, giving ourselves away to structures and beliefs. Let me here's something from Toni Morrison. I think it speaks to our time. I think all of us, if we look at the precepts, the predominant speech is the predominant focus, is what is right speech. Of course, right speech that's internal, how are we talking to ourselves, about ourselves? How are we talking about those others inside and outside? And how much are we projecting what they're doing out there to those other people, that if they would just stop doing what they're doing? I think the gift of this time is we all have to profoundly take responsibility. Toni Morrison says, oppressive language is dead language. The systemic looting of language can be recognized by the tendency of its users to forego its nuanced, complex, midwifery properties for menace and subjugation. Oppressive language does more than represent violence, it is violence. Does more than represent the limits of knowledge, it limits knowledge. Whether it is obscuring state language or the faux language of mindless media, whether it is the proud but calcified language of the academy or the commodity-driven language of science, whether it is the malign language of law without ethics or language designed for the estrangement of minorities, hiding its racist plunder in its literary check, it must be rejected, altered, and exposed. It is the language that drinks blood and laps vulnerabilities. Our work is to encourage new knowledge and the mutual exchange of ideas. Embodied listening, embodied presence. Zenju says language can never pin down slavery, genocide, or war, nor should it yearn for the arrogance to be able to do so. Its force, its felicity is in its reach towards the ineffable. What is it, this boundlessness and embodiment? How do we live from here? How do we speak from here? How do we act from here? We know not through our intellect, not through the processing, through concepts, through taking sides, although we do. but through the experience, the deep embodied felt experience, perceiving the world through these alive Zazen bodies. The way of tenderness is an experiential, non-intellectual, heartfelt acknowledgement of all embodied difference. It is a flexibility of perception rather than a settling into belief. It brings affirmation of life rather than suffering center stage. It is an acknowledgement of the unfolding experience of life that is effortlessly ever present in all living beings. And yet, it does not deny the uniqueness or similarities of our embodiment. It simply rises along the path of life if we allow it. I would suggest that this is living by vow that we've been pointing at this past month. Living by vow is completely present in this embodiment. And it is also completely devoted to the boundlessness and mystery and interconnection of everything. That is the great mystery and quest, the path of how do we live this. It's the Bodhisattva way. She says, if I were to define the way of tenderness, I would say that it is an acknowledgement, acknowledging and honoring all life and all that is in the world fully with heart and body. Acknowledging and honoring all life and all that is in the world fully with heart and body. This acknowledgement is wordless and is expressed in a deeply felt nod to everything and everyone. An inner bow to life, so to speak. The way of life is a response from below the surface of what appears to us when we are seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, or thinking. It is a response beyond the mind, but of the body. It rises up quite naturally without preconception, without our knowing the reasons for our tears, fierce anger, or language that come with it. But the welling up of tenderness, with it we are like newborn babies, simply experiencing the sensations of being alive. And it is our own unique experience. So how do we keep finding our way home, back to our hearts, to our bodies in the deepest sense? Our conditioned karmic bodies, we study it, reactivity. Whew, boy, it happens fast. Just going along and all of a sudden, whoa, where did that come from? But there is this ongoingness, this bowing to all of life, this willingness to turn and be turned that tenderizes. And I think when the student asked Suzuki Roshi, what would American Zen be like? And he said, very colorful. I think maybe he meant as every color in the whole rainbow. That maybe here, through each one of us, we can bring forward the boundlessness and the mystery. Through the suffering that is in our soil, that we have brought from other soils, but also in a deep commitment to wake up together. So here's my question. Of course, you can always, when we go into small groups, whatever, if anything has come up,